All right, I want to talk a little bit about some of the typical flaws that I see non-elite level players exhibiting. These are things that over a period of 15 years of observing hitters kind of come to realize. These are some of the basic flaws that you're going to see, certainly that I'm going to look for and be aware of and try to help correct if I'm working with somebody. So I'm going to talk about these in no particular order of importance. In other words, it's number one, whatever I put out here is number one, hip slide or aspects of disconnection. They can be of varying importance. They can vary in terms of the severity of the flaw. Some people can rotate, let's say, the hips reasonably well, but not really what I consider good enough. So, bottom line is you see various degrees of these flaws, various combinations of these flaws. I think the important thing from an instructor standpoint is to understand that you're going to see these flaws. You need to be aware of them. You need to know how to kind of analyze them. You need to know how to correct them. So first off, understand what the flaws are. So starting with what I consider and kind of deemed hip slide, which is not rotation of the hips. So instead of actually dropping the heel and starting to turn the hips, people are coming into heel plan and still kind of sliding. Typically, taking a frame or two, you're looking 30 frames per second, one click of the mouse on the frame. They may take a couple of frames in here to, stop the, let's say they stride, stop the lateral movement or the translational movement of the stride. It's simply taking them too long to stop the stride and get into the rotation. So they're suffering then from a lack of being able to rotate quickly, and what happens, of course, is their overall swing quickness is going to suffer. So that would certainly be one problem with hip slide. Also, of course, the energy is generated almost entirely by the angular momentum of the hip rotation, trunk rotation, and wrist rotation, what I refer to as the three rotations. So aspects of translational movement, basically any kind of this, I'm going, let's pretend like the picture's out here. So any kind of movement where I'm, in effect, kind of pushing this way, not helpful at all, degrading the momentum that you can get from body to back. So just be aware of this. Rotation, of course, is vital to a really good swing, and most hitters, simply put, do not know how to rotate well. Another one would be aspects of particular component, what I refer to as a component, which is the lead leg. Lead leg tending to open too much, allowing it to rotate open. In a sense, as I've described in a number of different, at my website, YouTube, I talked about this a little bit, kind of using the legs to try to turn the body. So you're getting this kind of thing here, as opposed to using the legs to support the trunk in rotation, which looks more like drop the heel and start to turn, something like that. You notice in that latter case, my lead leg did not open very much. So this is a flaw, various reasons why this is going to degrade the rotation. It's going to degrade and cause disconnection type problems between the hands, back, and the body in rotation. So that certainly is a flaw I see a lot. Insufficient tilt. That simply means many hitters are too straight up. They're standing in effect upright. A lot of them have been told to stand tall, stand upright, as opposed to creating what I refer to as this hip hinge, hip pivot, hip flexion, deadlift-like posture. Numerous ways I describe this movement here of flexing the hips to change the spine angle. So this movement here is vital, essentially vital to any good athlete in the context of creating very coordinated movement. But in the context of swinging, insufficient tilt. Simply put, don't know how to create hip flexion. Instead, what they tend to do is bend the knees, bending the knees and basically the most frequent, typical, normal, if you will, flaw is what I refer to as a reverse chain. We can think in terms of the kinetic chain. Basic understanding of kinetic chain is simply a series of body parts linked together to create some type of movement. In the case of what I refer to as a reverse chain, what the hitters are doing is variously leading with their arms. So instead of accelerating the hips as they drop the heel, instead of accelerating this area, pelvic area, they're accelerating the arms and upper body to get out in front of this. Essentially, they're getting out in front of the rotation. And many times, they're not even really rotating very well. And many times, the upper body starting has a kind of a pulling effect on the rotation. So in other words, the upper body starts, and what appears to be rotation is simply the upper body kind of pulling on the hips to rotate. It may look like fairly good rotation, but if you look at it closely, slow it down, you're going to see an acceleration of the arms and knob at the start of the swing. There are no elite level hitters that do that. It's the wrong chain of actions, and so it's a big flaw. And this gets back to the kind of what I refer to as the original sin of flaw, which is, most people from a kind of a normative, typical, developmental kind of thing, most people are just simply going to use their arms to try to figure out how to move the back into the contact area. So as I've demonstrated numerous times, little Johnny, little Mary kind of doing this thing, looking at the tee, trying to aim using their arms with no thought of any kind of good body posture or good movement of the trunk in rotation. It's simply not thought of early on. So that's why I refer to it as a kind of the original sin of just thinking in terms of using your arms to hit a ball. Another one would be, kind of within that, variously leading with the arms, reverse chain. Within that kind of context is the notion of back drag, where basically the back arm is being positioned like this kind of rotation here, balls pitches out this way. So rather than really moving the knob, linking it to the turns, as I turn here, this knob is linked to this trunk movement rotation. That as opposed to doing this. So you notice the bat's not being displaced. It's not going this way. And typically this is linked to some kind of hip sliding thing, what I refer to as kind of a slot and shift back. So that's certainly a flaw. See it quite a bit. See it a lot in certainly 8 to 12-year-old hitters. That's certainly fairly prevalent. Another one that kind of looking at the overall, kind of what I refer to as the geometry of the swing, most people have what I would kind of label as a poor swing plane. What does that mean? Well, I won't go into the details other than the fact that since the ball is coming, dropping at some angle, I need to be in a position to be coming slightly back up. So just thinking of a slight upswing going into contact, that's certainly how good hitters line up with balls on a fairly consistent basis. So aspects of a poor swing plane will be some violation of that. And the typical one that you're going to see that's reinforced by much instruction that you're going to see is this idea of kind of swinging down. So you're taking it down here and then somehow kind of leveling this out, which then leads to what I refer to as a relatively flat swing plane. So I see a lot of hitters that I label as having a relatively flat swing plane. Any ball waist down, they're going to have very difficult problems. If the ball's right here, let's say at your knees, somehow swinging down to somehow get to this, as I say variously about things like this. Good luck with that. That's you're going to not be able to pull that off very well. So that's certainly a flaw. Various parts of that, typically not tilting enough, is certainly a part of that, but I won't go into the details any more than that, other than just to label it as this is a common flaw. Basically a flat swing plane or a poor swing plane. One more that I think I'll mention here that I see quite a bit, which is basically what I refer to as a function of kind of this concept of loading back, where people think somehow, again, picture out that way. So they load back, doing some version of this, and which then leads to an inability to get back to a really good position to start the swing. So when I refer to this, there's numerous criticisms that I could levy on this particular kind of, cue, but certainly one is it leads to what I refer to as a lack of centeredness of the body as you start to unload the swing. And just to demonstrate briefly, let's say if my head is sitting over this hip joint as I start to swing, this is highly problematic. And I see a whole bunch of hitters these days kind of in that kind of position. If you want to develop the capacity to run a swing, this would certainly be one way to do it. Load back and kind of get position the body mass and let's say the head to navel, position that poorly, and you're destined to have a relatively poor swing. It's that simple. And I kind of mentioned in this context, these are not my rules. I didn't make these rules up in terms of how to create really good movement. In terms of swinging bat in a gravitational field, which is what we're dealing with, I didn't make the rules up. I just know the rules pretty well. This is one rule that if you violate it, if you're not sufficiently centered with the body mass, it's impossible to create a really good swing. One more I'll mention too, which is kind of hinted at it here, was just an idea of loading back. A lot of people don't even really understand what loading is. Here, I ask people all the time. They have very vague responses. They simply don't know what loading is. I'm going to explain what loading is in a specific demo here coming up shortly. Or, let's put it this way, it's going to be up on YouTube at some point here. But for right now, simply say that most people don't know how to load the body. There's a difference between loading the body and effective loading of the body, certainly from my perspective. So for now, simply leave it at, most people don't know what loading is, they don't know what effective loading is, they don't really know how to load the body to help create a good swing. So these are some of the basic flaws that I see all the time, and I just want to talk about these. As an instructor, I think it's incumbent upon instructors to understand these flaws, understand how to analyze them, understand how to correct them. So just wanted to kind of start this conversation a little bit about these flaws and how to go about correcting them. I want to start with simply labeling them and talking about them a little